chariots. Got it? Okay. So, chapter 10, we're going to look at this from two different directions today. We're going to look at it for the details of what happened, because actually this is the details of what happened in chapter 8. Okay, so this is the details of chapter 8, verses 3 through 12. And so we're going to be looking at it from that way. It's also going to set us up for our next chapter, because it's going to give us some information as to what is going on in our next chapter, which is David and Bathsheba. So, and then the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at what Hanan did and why it was so devastating to the people of Israel in his actions.
Kathy, you said this was the details of chapter 8,
Mhm.
verses
3 through 12.
Okay.
You should be able to get more information. It's just going to help us get more information on that. So it happened after this, and the after this is the Mephibosheth story. After all that's done, that the king of the people of Ammon died, and Hanun his son reigned in his place. And David said, I will show kindness to Hanun the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness to me. So we're not really sure where that kindness that the king showed to David. It could very well be that during all of that time that David was fleeing, that there was a kindness that was shown to him. It could also very well be that during the reign of Ishbosheth, there was a kindness that was shown to David, but we're not actually told what it is. Whatever the kindness was, David feels enough gratitude for what happened that he then decides that he's going to give a sympathy call to the land at the death of the king. So David sent by the hand of his servants to comfort him concerning his father. And David's servants came into the land of the people of Ammon. So David didn't just send a card, or a notice saying, hey, sorry to hear about your dad. He actually got a group of people together who likely would have brought some sort of tribute gifts or, however it was done at that time, and went in to express to the people of Ammon that David had sympathy for the death of their king. But the princes of the people of Ammon said to Hanun their lord, do you think that David really honors your father because he has sent comforters to you? Or has David not rather sent his servants to you to search the city, to spy it out, and to overthrow it? So David does a good thing, and he comes in, and as this group of men come in to the king, the advisors to Hanun say, he's not just sending people here for a sympathy call. He's spying everything out because he's going to overthrow us. So why would they say that?
Well, because he's done that before.
David had powerful military prowess, and so they knew that was part of it. Any other reason you can think of why they would feel that way?
Just fear.
Fear. Just because that's human instinct to seek out the worst in somebody. When you see them coming, are we not so guilty of that sometimes? Of someone doing something for us, and we immediately wonder, why would they do that? Why would they be doing that? The motive of it is. And so it is a very human nature that the people, plus it kind of tends to make these advisors look a little bit important, that they're taking in some really important news to the king to let him know what's going on. So for their own purposes or for whatever reason, they give this information, and Hanun buys it. He buys what they're saying. Verse 4.
Way back when David pretended to be insane.
Yes.
And anyway, so this wouldn't be the first time, they had suspect that he had come in feigning, insanity for his own safety or for other motives.
Well, he certainly has a checkered background in some of the areas that he went to, and lived down in the Philistine camp, and he definitely has some checkered background that he's looking into, right? So therefore, in verse 4, therefore Hanan took David's servants. So here's the consequences of giving that information. And he shaved off half of their beards, and he cut off their garments in the middle at their buttocks, and sent them away. So, I mean, we can look at this and kind of go, oh, that is just hysterical. But honestly, for the time, it was a shameful, insulting, disgraceful way to treat some ambassadors that came from Israel on a good deed. And by doing that to the ambassadors, you are doing it to the king. Right? Is that not true? It's true even in our world today. The way that our ambassadors are treated in other countries are taken very seriously because they represent the United States of America. And they come with the full power and authority of that. So when someone mistreats one of our ambassadors, they face the consequences and the wrath and fury of the president and the people of the United States of America. So this would be the circumstances for David when he sends his ambassadors. They are insulting them, but they're humiliating. They're also insulting David.
Is there some correlation between shaving half the beard off about, did they not consider themselves more powerful?
Okay, so that's where we're going next with this. In fact, your packet is full of some information that we're going to kind of look at if we can. This first picture on your packet is not a current picture, but something from early 1900th century. If you can see, this guy has half a beard on his picture here as someone else is doing the shaving of that. Let's look through some of these pictures real quickly. The first one is the map, and I want you to notice on the map that it shows you Syria up at the top, Ammon in the middle, closer to Jerusalem, and then Moab down at the bottom. Just an easy way for you to picture as we're discussing these areas. They're not that far away, but this is sort of helps you picture what's going on. The following pictures are, the first one is, if you notice, this should answer your question, Mom. It says, it came out of Wikipedia, and it said 15 years later, it's talking about some things that were going on. The beards attracted the notice of the German occupying forces in Eastern Europe, who, like the Polish troops of Hitler's army, often targeted the facial hair of pious Jews for the purpose of perverse pleasure. After the Nazis entered the Galician town of Milech in September 1939, a former townswoman testified at the trial. A motorcycle with a sidecar would sometimes come through and used to catch Jews with beards, and they used to drag them out of their homes for shaving. The shaving, however, would always be done in an abusive manner, either by leaving half of the beard intact or by intentionally removing bits of flesh along with it. Later in 1939, according to other witnesses at the same trial, German troops seized bearded Jews and dragged them off to the local synagogues, where they began removing their beards with knives, sometimes to the point of drawing blood. Afterwards, they compelled those Jews to turn around and shave others. Whoever did not want to do so would have been beaten. So this picture down here at the bottom on that particular page is a Jewish man, and that's his son. And he's being forced to cut off the beard of his father at the insistence of the soldiers you can see standing around him. If you look at the father's eyes, and you look at the boy's eyes, you can imagine the amount of humiliation and shame and sadness that went with that, which is exactly why it was selected to be done this way, was to bring that maximum shame. The beards were at the time of David and continue even today to be a sign of masculinity, of reverence, of following God's laws on not cutting the corners of your beards, and it it was something that was so critically important to people that they used it as a pledge. They would pledge by their beards, that something would be done. And if it doesn't get done, you can shave off the beard, because it wouldn't be done. Men would rather do almost anything than to lose their beard. By shaving off half of it, you're showing that it was there, but we were able to remove it, which would make you have to cut off the other half, right? As it would be growing out. So let's turn and look at a couple of other ones, because I want to kind of show you how this is done. The one at the top is, again, an elderly Jewish man, and they're shaving off with a knife half of his beard. Whether they left it or didn't leave it, I don't know, but there was no way to fight it at that time, as people would attempt to do whatever they could do to humiliate. Down below, you can see the elderly man using scissors to cut off his probably long white beard that he would have.
The other guy, the young guy, smiling.
These are the soldiers who think this is hysterically funny, and the little man is not able to do anything. Turn the page, you see a couple of the Nazi soldiers, and they're plucking out this man's beard with their hands. And so they're pulling out pieces of his beard, and he can do nothing at that point. Why would they do that? Well, of course it's going to cause a great deal of pain, but it's a humiliating move. It's showing that we have no value with that which you hold reverent, that you have. The one, this one is a Holocaust picture. I included it because it just shows the guy wearing just the shirt, probably no underwear, I'm sure, And this would have been similar to what our story tells you about, that they cut it off at the buttocks to expose, to humiliate, to force people to, walk around with your butt hanging out, basically.
And all of those men are beardless.
Yes.
No one's allowed to have a beard.
No, they had no beards. They would be their heads,
Shaved.
all of their heads would be shaved during this time, and even the women would have their heads shaved and stuff done for. It humiliates. It puts you in a position of having no say-so, no authority. It was done for lice. It was done for lack of cleanliness. It was all humiliation. It was all a way of humiliating, but it gives us a little visual of perhaps what the Jewish men who were in David's army, this is about, where they would have cut their clothing.
You talked about the level of their butts, that it would have somewhat exposed their front and everything.
Oh, absolutely.
And it would have left them feeling very vulnerable.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, and that's the point.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's the point. In the next page, it's a little Jewish boy. It's a young Jewish boy, and he has his peyots, the little curls in the front. Similar later on, not so much in David's time, but later on, it became a symbol of their religious adherence. Today, there's a group in Israel called the Hasidic Jews that you would see. You often see them with the peyot curls in the front. Those are not cut as a little boy. You start as a little boy growing those, and those are never cut. So as men get older and older, you see those peyots get longer and longer, and they curl them tighter and tighter so that they don't hang down to here. So they just learn to curl them with their fingers tighter and tighter. But it's a sign that they're following the laws that God had for their people. It became something that throughout history they could use as a way of humiliating. So they would pull this young man's peyots out and likely just cut them off close to the head for no reason other than the fact that they could, and people thought it was funny. So why would you do that? You would do that for humiliation, right?
I've seen Orthodox Jews in downtown LA in long black robes
Mm-hmm.
with that.
Those would be the Hasidic Jews. Yep, absolutely. Turn the page. You see, here's another one. And a soldier, probably for the camera, showing off. And he's got a little elderly Jewish man there, and he's cutting off his beard. You can see the beard on his chest as he's cutting the hair off. And the last one is just another picture. It was a grainy one, an old one, of cutting off both the beards and the payots of some of the Jewish men that they had captured. And again, not necessarily any reason why they would want to do this, other than the fact that they could do this.
And showed their power, that they were powerful.
So this thing that happens to David and his men is something that's been carried out throughout history. Of course, these are mostly pictures of a certain time frame because that's when photography was popular, and we have pictures of this. We don't have pictures of the Inquisition. We don't have pictures of the Crusades. We don't have pictures of those type of things that happen. But I can practically guarantee you that the same things have happened from the time of David on through, as people found this to be a way to humiliate and bring Jewish men to their knees. It continues on today. It's still done. If you read enough newspaper articles, you'll see that oftentimes when there are skirmishes between the Jews and the Arabs, one of the things that they can do is cut off beards or cut off payots. If a Hasidic Jew or a Jew with that is on his own and gets jumped, you can just about guarantee they're going to cut off at least one of those as a sign. And so I guess I wanted to bring that up and really take some time to show you those pictures, because it's really important as we go through our study and we read these kind of things. While it's very important as part of our chapter study to see that Hanan's men did something that was so abusive and all of that, it's even more important that we realize that this is something that the enemy has used and continues to use almost solely towards the Jewish people. This is not something that you generally see in any other culture of people. But it is done to the Jewish people, and it has been done to the Jewish people throughout history as a way to humiliate them, and continues on through today. So when you see, if you happen to see on the news, or you happen to read an article, or you happen to see a picture or anything where you see that being done, keep in mind that this is something that the enemy has used. This is a supernatural, spiritual battle that continues on. And just like when Sherry was asking about the Temple Mount area, and I said it's just fascinating to see that little speck of land is just so fought over. It's also fascinating when we realize that things like in our story today are continuing on. Anti-Semitism that was towards the Jewish people in the Bible is not slowing down. In fact, it's ratcheting up as we get into this even stronger prophetic time that we are now into. You see it ratcheting up. In fact, we just passed some sort of bill, didn't we, about some anti-Semitism thing that we tried to do?
Hate speech.
Okay. And so, I mean, I don't know, good or bad, I'm not judging that. I'm simply saying it's a topic of conversation. At the UN, every single year, it's a topic of conversation. How bad the nation of Israel is, how bad the Jewish people treat the Arab people, occupied land, crimes against humanity that Israel has perpetrated against the rest of the world. It just goes on and on and on and on. It's on our college campuses in a strong, strong way. if you talk to a 20-something person, unless they've had some background teaching and have parents that have taught them well, there is a pretty strong anti-Semitic flavor in most young people today. Because they believe some of the lies that are being told by some of these other people against the Jewish people. And so, anti-Semitism, although this is being done as a humiliation for what they see as David coming in as a military conquest, it is alive and well and kicking and has been since the time of David. And I felt like this was a good opportunity, although I know I'm preaching to a choir here because you guys feel exactly the same way. It is a good opportunity for us to remember that it is alive and well, and sometimes in exactly the same manner. It just doesn't change because it's a spiritual battle. And the goal is always for the enemy to bring the Jewish people to their knees. That the rest of the world would hate them and bring them to their knees. Why? Because if he can get rid of the Jewish people, early on if he could get rid of the Jewish people, the Messiah, the seed, could not come through the Jewish line, right? Now, if the Jewish people are no longer alive and well, then the Messiah does not return. Because when did Jesus say that he would come back? When the Jewish people call out to him. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And Jesus says in Matthew 24, until they cry out, I will not return. And so if the Jewish people are not here to cry out, how does God accomplish his purposes? And yet God continues to protect them, causes them to even thrive, right? The hand of God is with them. The covenant of God is strong. He is faithful. We see all of that even as we see the spiritual battle of anti-Semitism ratcheting up. We see the faithfulness of God in that the land of Israel and the Jewish people are thriving in Israel and blessed, and their land is growing, and they're in every way providing for the rest of the world, and they live in a country that most of the Middle Eastern people would give their eye teeth to be able to live in a country that's free. So God is also staying true and faithful to his covenant, even in the midst of that battle that's waging on. And I guess what I really wanted to share with you today was just a reminder. Please, please, please go out and remember to share with people that battle is occurring, and you want to be on the right side of that battle. And if you just sit silently and you say nothing and you do nothing, then you choose a side when you do that. But when you speak out and you speak truth, then you're standing on the side that you want to be on. So be bold, because it is alive and well. All right, verse 5. When they told David, he sent to meet them because the men were greatly ashamed, because their beards and the exposure. And the king said, wait at Jericho until your beards have grown and then return. So David shows them a compassion by not having them come back into Jerusalem and having the rest of the people all see them that way. He allows them to stay where they're at and for their beards to grow. But deep down, David knows what? This is not only against his people, but against him also. And he knows that. Now, in verse 6, when the people of Ammon saw that they had made themselves repulsive to David, it's like, oh man. All right, I think it's an interesting word, repulsive. What does my Amplified say? Obnoxious and disgusting to David. Yeah, you think? And made themselves repulsive. The people of Ammon sent and hired the Syrians of Beth Rehob and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and from the king of Makkah, 1,000 men, and from Ishtob, 12,000 men. This would have been a common military strategy. If your army isn't big enough to go and do what you need to have done, you can hire mercenary soldiers who would come in and fight with you. In Chronicles 19, we're told the amount, if you're interested in it, we're told the amount of silver and talents of silver that they paid them for the job, something that was just common at the time. It's a way that you can get your army to grow if you don't have enough men. Now, when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all of the army of the mighty men. All right, so Ammon and Syria at this point are kind of linking arms together and deciding to go against David, right? David hears of what's going on, and he decides that he needs to do something right away to stop this. So who does he send? Joab. And who can tell me, who remembers about Joab?
He's the head of the military.
Okay.
His nephew, isn't he?
Yes.
Yes.
Nephew, head of the military, the guy who kills Abner, right? So there's history. We know a little bit about him, and he's in charge of the military. So he sends Joab and all of the army of the mighty men. Now that can be looked at two ways. The mighty men are a group of men. We're going to do a little bit more research on them in a little soon, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today. They were a group of 37 men who were literally named in Chronicles. Their names are there. They're the soldiers who stand out and lead David's army. So there are 37 names. However, you wouldn't send 37 men out to fight these numbers that we're talking about here with the Syrians and the people of Ammon. So my guess is what he's talking about here is that these are the leaders, and they have an army with them as they go out. The mighty men go out and fight this. So the people of Ammon came out and put themselves in battle array at the entrance of the gate. And the Syrians of Zobah and Beth Rahab and Ishtab and Makkah were by themselves in a field. So some of them are stationary at the gate, and some are going out into an open area. They're kind of trying to hit them from all sides, right? They're surrounding the area where they're going to be. When Joab saw that the battle line was against him before and behind, he chose some of Israel's best and put them in battle array against the Syrians. So this is more information on just the military prowess of how he's going to do it. It's interesting because if you look at it, he's kind of surrounded, right? They're in the front and they're in the back. But at no point are you going to see Joab even suggesting that he's willing to throw up his hands and say, oh, we better back off, guys. So, and the rest of the people he put under the command of Abishai, his brother, that he might set them in battle array against the people of Ammon. So we met Abishai too, his brother, and they're separated up. Each one of them are leading people. And he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you should come and help me. But if the people of Ammon are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. All right, well, that seems reasonable. I don't know how they got word to each other. That would be interesting. I'm sure they would send a soldier. That's the only way you could do it. But that takes time, right? Huh? Flags, maybe, you think?
They all had standards back then, so going way, way back, that they would use for signals.
Maybe, fire, smoke? I don't know. How would you send? I don't know. I mean, it could be any of those, I guess. So he gives them a little pep talk, the little army. He says, be of good courage, and let us be strong for our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what is good in his sight. So that's a pretty good little pep talk. What is it he's telling them? Be strong for our people, so that would be for the people of Israel, and for the cities. Okay, Bella, you're going to have to leave if you're going to disrupt. You can't stay in here if you're going to be disrupted.
Especially you can't stay there.
Just push her off. Just push her off. Push her off, Sherry. Don't let her get up there. I don't really want her up there anyway, so she needs
I'm
to.
so sorry.
So yeah, you need to go. Go. You shouldn't be at Bible study.
She's so cute. I gotta pick up her from her.
No, she doesn't go outside. She's never been outside.
I
She wouldn't know what to do. So he's talking about the people. God is with the people, and God is with the land, and and may God do what is right. What it says, but the people are let's see what, and for the cities of our God, and may God do what is right and what is good in his sight. So Joab and the people who were with him drew near for the battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. So Joab's part of the army is fighting the Syrians, and they flee. Keep in mind the numbers. You're talking about a really large amount of people that are fleeing. And when the people of Ammon saw that the Syrians had started to flee, okay, the Ammonites are in the back, right? Abishai is fighting them. Then they also fled before Abishai and entered the city. So Joab returned from the people of Ammon and went to Jerusalem. All right, so that's leaving some unfinished business. They didn't conquer them at this time, but they go back to Jerusalem. Why would they do that? Because it was likely winter, and you don't fight a battle in the winter. It's rainy and it's muddy, and so they would wait until the spring and they would go out. And we know that because in our next chapter, he's going to go back out and take care of them. But it was a common thing to do for military battle to fight at the wrong time of year when it became too late and the rains began. When the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered together. Then Hadadezer sent and brought out the Syrians who were beyond the river, and they came to Helam. And Shobach, the commander of Hadadezer's army, went before them. Hadadezer. Is that probably right?
All
Hadadezer.
A's are soft A as in flower.
So
Hadadezer.
Hadadezer. When it was told David, he gathered all Israel, crossed over the Jordan, and came to Helam. So now David's personally involved in this, right? He needs to get himself personally involved. And the Syrians set themselves in battle array against David and fought with him. When the Syrians fled before Israel, and then the Syrians fled before Israel, and David killed 700 charioteers. So those would be the drivers of the chariots, and 40,000 horsemen of the Syrians, and struck Shobach, the commander of their army, who died there. And when all the kings who were servants to Hadadezer saw they were defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. So the Syrians were afraid to help the people of Ammon anymore. So they were put into submission. That's the defeat of the Syrians at that time. So the important thing for us to remember is that this is details of the battles that occurred in chapter 8, that the Ammonites they did not completely defeat them. The Syrians have been defeated at this point. David doesn't get involved until the middle of the chapter. He comes in, he defeats. What is the lesson there? Perhaps that David needs to be in an active position in the military with this.
Well, he was a military genius,
Yes.
so to speak.
And God used him in a mighty way, didn't he, in the military part of it?
Well, at least he left the horses.
That makes you happy that he left the horses alone. All right, and it also sets us into position for our next chapter, which we're going to just start on today. So you want to turn the camera off, and we'll do just a beginning of. Let me find my little box.
Do I
Of our
need to
next
push
one.
the button?
Yes, just